Good morning, everyone. This is the Vermont House Committee on Commerce and Economic Development. It is Thursday, April 9th, 2026 at 9:05 in the morning. So we're beginning our day today. Take a run through of F-198, which is an act relating to the regulation of tobacco products and tobacco substitutes. People might be wondering what the commerce is looking at tobacco products. And there is section in there that deals with consumer protection, which is our purview. That's what we'll be looking at, but the Legislative Counsel, Jen Carby, will be walking us through the whole bill. And our attention will be more directed towards the consumer protection aspect of the bill. Jen, good morning. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Good morning, Jen Carby from the Office of Legislative Counsel. This is fun. I don't spend a lot of time in your committee room, so great to be here on S-198. So, you like it up on the screen?
Yes.
S-198 as passed by the Senate. This is an act relating to the regulation of tobacco products and tobacco substitutes. Starts off by amending the chapter in Title VII on tobacco products. There are definitions. So this is adding some language to the tobacco license definition, adding language specifically around importation, distribution, wholesale, and wholesale sale, in addition to retail sale that licenses are issued for. And it also adds language reflecting the other types of products. Tobacco substitutes, for those who are new to the tobacco statutes, is kind of our statutory term for e-cigarettes. It has also grown to include nicotine products, all kinds of vaping supplies. So the cartridges or the open tank containers, the liquids that go in with an e-cigarette, all of that is kind of in the, you'll see in a minute, the definition of tobacco substitute. So tobacco products, tobacco substitutes, substances containing nicotine or otherwise intended for use with a tobacco substitute or tobacco paraphernalia. A tobacco substitute is any product that meets all of the following conditions, and this is a little bit modified from current law, but some of it is also just reorganized. The tobacco product is any product, a tobacco substitute is any product that is manufactured from, derived from, or contains tobacco or nicotine, whether natural or synthetic, including nicotine alkaloids and analogs. And the product is intended for human consumption by smoking, chewing, inhaling, sucking, absorbing, or consuming in any other manner. It is not a tobacco product as defined in this section. And then it specifies that the term includes electronic cigarettes and other electronic or battery powered devices. And this is existing law that contain or are designed to deliver nicotine or other substances into the body through the inhalation of vapor and have not been approved by the FDA for tobacco cessation or other medical purposes. And this specifically adds that it includes nicotine pouches and any liquids, whether nicotine-based or not, and delivery devices sold separately for use with a tobacco substitute. And then, as under current law, cannabis products are carved out because they're treated differently. So we're trying to keep the regulation of cannabis and tobacco separate from the statutes. And then several definitions are added around wholesale dealers, and this is to reflect some changes you'll see later in the bill that move the licensure of wholesale dealers from the Department of Taxes in Title 32 to the Department of Liquor and Lottery in this Title VII. So we're moving the definitions over and adding them, basically the same ones with just a couple of kind of technical word updates from Title 32. So we have licensed wholesale dealer, wholesale dealer, wholesale dealer's license, wholesale outlet, and wholesale price. Again, existing definitions just being moved. Section 1002, clarifying that because we're about to talk about licenses for wholesale dealers, that this section deals with licenses for retail sale. Current law prohibits anyone from engaging in the retail sale of tobacco products, tobacco substitutes, or tobacco paraphernalia in their place of business without a tobacco license. There's a separate endorsement for tobacco substitutes. Under current law, the board, this is the Board of Liquor and Lottery, prepares and issues tobacco licenses and tobacco substitute endorsement forms and applications. And under current law specifies that these are incorporated into the liquor license forms and applications prepared and issued under this title. This section is doing some work to try to decouple the tobacco and liquor licenses, but I think you'll hear more from some witnesses about whether we were successful in doing that in the bill as it came out of the Senate, and also whether that is something that they do or do not support. It increases the licensing fees for tobacco licenses and tobacco endorsements. Under current law, they do get paid to some extent the legislative body of the municipality. There's some pass through happening there, but under current law, the tobacco license is a fee of $110. This would increase that to $150. And under current law, the tobacco endorsement is $50, and this bill would increase that to $75. There's some increases to the penalties for selling without a license and endorsement as applicable. So first, it changes it from being a misdemeanor with a criminal fine to being a civil penalty, and it increases that from not more than $200 for the first offense to not more than $2,000, from not more than $500 for each subsequent offense to not more than $5,000. And then it adds some additional language about not engaging in importation, distribution, wholesale sale, or retail sale without being licensed as a wholesale dealer, or purchasing them from a wholesale dealer, and it's striking out the reference to the tax statutes because that's being done in this chapter. Here's our new section on wholesale dealers, section 1002B. And again, this is moving, it's actually 5 separate sections in Title 32 in the tobacco taxes chapter that collapsed into one section here with just some subsection headings.
Jen, can we
Yes.
back up? Now that we're changing the penalty from a criminal offense to a civil offense, who determines what the civil penalty will be?
I believe that the AG's office or DLL. Yeah, Department of Liquor and Lottery consulted the room.
And is that anywhere in the statute that provides that authority?
I mean, they have the enforcement authority for the chapter,
Okay.
so I mean, that's where that authority comes from, but I will refer to the commissioner and others to talk to you more about how that works and if any changes are.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is requiring a wholesale dealer to get a license now from the Division of Liquor Control in the Department of Liquor and Lottery as opposed to from the Department of Taxes. Otherwise, this language again is just moved over from the tax statutes in order to move that authority. Separate application and license is required for each wholesale outlet. And the license fee would be $1,245 for each outlet. Under current law, there is no charge for a wholesale dealer license under the tax statute, so this piece is new. But this is aligned with the license fee for a wholesale dealer in the liquor statutes. This is consistent with DLL wholesale licensure fees. Requires certain information to be provided for a wholesale dealer license, provides penalties for selling any licensed wholesale dealer who, I shouldn't say licensed wholesale dealers, I'm reading it out loud. Anybody who sells, offers for sale, or possesses with intent without having first obtained a license would be subject to a civil penalty, and these penalties are increased to align with the penalties in the retail statutes. Just gonna myself on this particular piece before I lose it. The term of the license is valid as long as the licensee continues to do business in the same location, so they don't have to renew the fee like the retail licensees do. And it allows the division to liquor control to revoke or suspend the license of any licensed wholesale dealer for failure to comply with provisions of this chapter. One of the provisions of the corporation statutes, the tobacco tax statutes, or the manufacturer, the settlement agreement with the tobacco manufacturers in Title 33. Next, we have section 1005. This is under current law. This is the prohibition and penalties for possession, use, or purchase by a person under 21 years of age. And so under current law, a person under 21 years of age is prohibited from possessing, purchasing, or attempting to purchase tobacco products, tobacco substitutes, or tobacco paraphernalia unless they are working for a retailer and doing so in the course of their employment, or they're in possession in connection with indigenous cultural tobacco products. It also prohibits a person under 21 years of age from misrepresenting their age to purchase or attempt to purchase these items. This would strike out those prohibitions and the penalty provisions for possession, but it would retain, and this was some later in the process changes in the Senate, would retain the penalty and in fact increase the penalty for a person under 21 years of age who misrepresents their age by using false identification to purchase these items. And that increases the civil penalty from not more than $50 to not more than $100, or up to 10 hours of community service, or both. And this adds language from the previous provision that has these actions under this section being brought in the Judicial Bureau in the same manner as a traffic ticket. Section 1007 is furnishing tobacco to someone under 21 years of age, and some increased penalties there. So under current law, a person that sells or furnishes tobacco products, tobacco substitutes, or tobacco paraphernalia to someone under 21 years of age is subject to a civil penalty of not more than $100 for the first offense and not more than $500 for a subsequent offense. This increases the penalty to not more than $150 for the first offense and imposes a civil penalty and license suspension for any subsequent offense. There were license suspensions under current law as well. Again, still through the Judicial Bureau, existing law requires Department of Liquor Control to do compliance testing, make sure that retailers are not selling to people under 21. And then this is the language with the increased penalties for subsequent violations. So any violation by a tobacco licensee after a sale violation or during a compliance test within 6 months after a previous violation is a multiple violation. And here are the penalties in addition to anything else under the title. Second violation is some of this is just changing the formatting a bit, and the language should be clear that we're talking about consecutive days. So still suspension for 2, this clarifies consecutive weekdays and adds a $1,000 civil penalty rather than up to $500. Third violation is still 15-day suspension, again, adding consecutive days, and this would be a $2,000 civil penalty. Fourth violation, still 90 days, again, adding consecutive, and this would be a $3,500 civil penalty. And then a fifth violation under current law is a 1-year suspension. This would call for revocation of the license and a $5,000 civil penalty. We have some expanded language around contraband and seizure. Under existing law, any cigarettes or other tobacco products that have been sold, offered, or possessed for sale in violation of certain sections are deemed contraband and subject to seizure. This adds in specifically tobacco substitutes as well, adds in some additional sections. 1010, you'll see in a moment, is the online sales, and 1013 is the new section on deceptive products. So these are all now deemed contraband and subject to seizure by the Department of Liquor and Lottery or the Department of Taxes. And this adds language specifying that the destruction of these products that have been seized will be at the expense of the violator, and that disposition must be in compliance with the Agency of Natural Resources hazardous waste rules. And we will, I think, learn more from some of the witnesses about the items that they're talking about and may explain some of the hazardous waste rationale. Specifies that any person in possession of property that's considered contraband, the fine is per item. The changes to that section. Section 1010 is the existing prohibition on the shipping of cigarettes, roll your own tobacco, fill cigars, snuff, tobacco substitutes, substances containing nicotine or otherwise intended for use with a tobacco substitute or tobacco paraphernalia that have been ordered online. I'll use the shorthand, but by mail or through a computer network, telephone, or other electronic network. Under current law, nobody is allowed to cause those to be shipped to anyone other than a licensed wholesale dealer or retail dealer in the state. This strikes out retail dealers. It will only be available for wholesale dealers to receive online purchases. And then it adds language clarifying that shipments apply to each substance as a separate violation. Now we get, I think, to the section that the chair was mentioning as a particular consumer protection provision. This is a new section on deceptive tobacco products and tobacco substitutes. This prohibits anyone from marketing, promoting, labeling, branding, advertising, distributing, offering for sale, or selling a tobacco product or tobacco substitute by first imitating a product that is not a tobacco product or tobacco substitute. That includes imitating a food or brand of food commonly marketed to minors, including candy, desserts, cereal, and beverages. School supplies commonly used by minors, including erasers, highlighters, pens, and pencils. Portable devices, including smartphones, smartwatches, video games, and game consoles, and inhalers. And a product based on or depicting a character, personality, or symbol known to appeal to minors, including a celebrity, a character in a comic book, movie, television show, or video game, or a mythical creature. They cannot market, offer, sell product by concealing the nature of the tobacco product or substitute, or using terms for describing or depicting a product that's described in A through D here.
And so everything A through D is not a limited
No,
description.
right. It's including means including but not limited to for Title I. Section 1A is a conforming change to the Judicial Bureau's jurisdiction, just reflecting the changes made to 7 VSA Section 1005, because the prohibition now there is on misrepresentation of age by a person under 21 purchase tobacco products.
Perfect.
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
Can you remind me how the Judicial Bureau works in terms of who presents complaints and who represents, I guess, the state or whatever in those matters?
That is really not my area of expertise. So I'm going to ask that you have.
You and I.
Yes, yeah. It's not
Okay.
healthcare or health related. It's probably not my area. Good question though, and I'm happy to find out if you don't hear from other witnesses.
Yeah.
I'll try to answer.
Great. We're good. AG's office. So sections 2 and 3 were deleted in the Senate. Section 4 relates to, now we're into the tax statutes and the confidentiality of tax records. This adds the Department of Liquor and Lottery to the list of entities to whom the Commissioner of Taxes may provide a tax return or return information. And that is limited to purposes of investigating potential violations of and enforcing the tobacco statutes in Title VII. So this allows tax department to disclose tax return information to the Department of Liquor and Lottery for purposes of investigating potential violations and enforcing tobacco statutes.
But they have to have an MOU between.
It says it doesn't have to. It says it in the commissioner's discretion and subject to conditions and requirements that the commissioner may provide, including any IRS confidentiality requirements. So there may be in practice, but it's not a statutory requirement.
Jen, is that already the case for liquor?
I would have to look at the list. I don't know if the Department of Liquor and Lottery knows if they have access to tax department information.
Thank you.
Section 5. Now we're into the definitions in the tobacco taxes statutes. This is the tobacco tax chapter in Title 32. So this is making some changes to the definition of cigarette, really to be to align with the definitions in Title 33 that apply to the master settlement agreement with the tobacco manufacturers. So I don't believe this is a substantive change, but it is keeping us in alignment with both our other definition in Title 33 and also with that master settlement agreement. Keeps in some references to wholesale dealers, but reflecting that the definition that the licensure is now in Title 7. Definition 15 of other tobacco products, because tobacco substitutes are lumped in with other tobacco products in the tobacco taxes chapter. This is making some conforming changes to reflect the expanded descriptions of use of what constitutes tobacco substitute. And then wholesale dealer, a couple of updates to the definitions and reflecting again that the licensure occurs now in Title 7 for this bill. The next couple of sections are more conforming changes reflecting the transfer of that wholesale dealer licensure authority to Department of Liquor and Lottery. So again, making the references to be to Title 7. And also there's one provision that I did not move to Title 7 that has to do with the bonding requirements from the tax department. And so instead of the bond being in subchapter 2, it's now been moved to a different subchapter. So I'm just referring to the section of this chapter. Another conforming change in section 7 is just to reflect that most of the statutes that are being exempted from this provision have already been or are being repealed and have been moved to Title 7. So it's just a reference to the remaining section in this chapter. Section 8 redesignates, that's moving that one bonding provision and redesignating it within the tobacco tax chapter. Section 9 is repealing the tax department licensure of wholesale dealers, again, because that was moved to Title 7. Section 10 was deleted in the Senate. Section 11 calls for some study and report. This directs the Department of Taxes in collaboration with the Department of Liquor and Lottery and the Office of the Attorney General, and in consultation with wholesalers and other interested stakeholders, to identify efficient and effective practices for imposing taxes on tobacco substitutes based on the concentration of nicotine they contain, and directing them to evaluate the continued use of tax stamps as evidence of payment of the excise tax on cigarettes, little cigars, and roll-your-own tobacco in Vermont, considering the pros and cons of taking alternative approaches for certifying tax compliance. So just to take a step back for a moment, the bill as introduced would have imposed, would have used tax stamps for the tobacco substitutes and had different tax rates based on concentration of nicotine. Some concerns were raised in the Senate, and so they opted to move this to a study instead. That's the first piece here. And then there was interest in looking at whether tax stamps was still the best way to go about certifying tax compliance. And to quote Senator Clarkson, the 21st century.
Jen,
Yes,
do we tax vapes?
these are vapes. So yes, we do, but we tax them under the other tobacco products
Okay.
taxes, as
Is
opposed
that the
to
same
using
with-
tax stamps.
That's the same with snuff, and chew, and
I believe
pipe
those are,
tobacco.
yes, I believe those all fall under, and I don't know if Ted from JFO has more clarification, more clarity on that. I believe it is just cigarettes, little cigars, and roll your own tobacco that are taxed using a particular approach with the tax stamps. But we do tax, yes, we do tax all tobacco products. Currently,
But I'm just wondering
just not based on
how
nicotine
we,
concentration.
how we understand if tax is being paid on all the other things.
There is not currently certification of tax compliance in the same manner that there is for cigarettes. So I don't know that there is as clear, at least in a retail setting, a manner of identifying whether the tax has been paid. But
I'm
you may
wondering
hear
if we're
from-
missing something when we're looking at this issue. We'll have that conversation in commission.
Yeah, so you could certainly think about adding in language about how to certify tax compliance for other products as well.
I think we want to make it as easy as possible for investigators that come in to a retail facility to know if the products that are being sold there have gone through the system and are being taxed. so that the state is gaining a due tax.
Yeah, it's a good point, and there may be other processes that exist that were not talked about in other committees, so you may have other witnesses who can weigh in more on that.
Jen, before you,
Yes.
can you talk about why we're focusing on the concentration of nicotine, if that's, and looking at that kind of taxing in this study?
I think you're probably going to hear a lot more about that this morning from the Attorney General's office and others.
Thanks.
Yes, there is a significant range of nicotine concentrations in these products that it differs from the way a lot of other tobacco products have been raised. All right, so the findings and recommendations are due on or before January 15th, 2027, about taxing tobacco substitutes based on nicotine concentration and the continued use of tax stamps, including proposed next steps and legislative needs. Took a guess at which committees would be looking at this, so you may want to add your committee as recipient as well. I have on here House Human Services and Ways and Means, and Senate Economic Development, Finance, and Health and Welfare. Finally, the act would take effect on July 1st, 2026, except that transfer of licensure authority for wholesale dealers from the tax department to the Department of Liquor and Lottery would take effect on July 1st of 2027. That is it.
Any questions for Jen? Jen, thank you very much.
I'm planning to stay and listen.
Commissioner. Good morning.
Good morning. Nice to see you all. You did organized here. For the record, my name is Wendy Knight. I'm the Commissioner of the Department of Liquor and Lottery. First, I would like to thank the Attorney General's office and the Tax Department. We have been working with them diligently over the past several months. And I think what we have arrived at, which the bill came out of the Senate, is a really good bill that we can all support. I'll just be brief. We have a lot of visitors, and I guess we're called visitors, witnesses, visitors. I used to be tourism and marketing, so everyone's a visitor. Okay, so the first couple things is obviously the most important piece, or one of the most important pieces of the bill, is that it moves the wholesale licensing from the tax department to the Department of Liquor and Lottery. This is something we had proposed to the tax department. It makes sense for the Department of Liquor and Lottery to have that full regulatory scope under our department. The other piece is
Wendy, can you just go in
sorry,
a little
yes.
deeper into that of why it's important for you to be able to have the full scope and sharing it with town?
Well, so the way it works now is the tax department has the regulatory authority to license wholesale tobacco dealers, but it's not really a license. And we are not privy to the information, we, the Department of Liquor and Lottery, because it's confidential tax information. We're not privy to who the tax department has licensed as a wholesale dealer. That's
Interesting.
kind of basic. Yeah. So it makes sense, just like the framework of when you think about alcohol, the framework is that we have retail licenses, we have manufacturer licenses, we have wholesale licenses. And so we're using that same paradigm on the tobacco and, you know, obviously wanting to move that licensing for the wholesale tobacco retail dealers to us.
How many wholesale dealers are there?
I don't know.
Because I noticed it's not in the there's nothing in the fiscal note about it,
Yeah.
and because they don't.
Because they're not like.
So we can, I think that makes sense, right? Obviously, it makes sense for us to have that ability to create a wholesale dealer's license and to license and regulate, just like we do with all the other licenses that we issue.
Does that also give you another tool in your toolbox when we're dealing with internet sales? That's another fine or civil penalty that you can apply to someone outside of Vermont, because they're trying to sell in Vermont on the internet, they're not licensed. Is that something else that you can actually apply to them?
If, yes,
I don't-
that they would be an unlicensed dealer, right? Because if we have access, like we do for our other licenses, it's public information. We would know who a wholesale dealer was. And so we would be able to identify by default who the unlicensed.
So you could impose a civil penalty on them, as well as the Attorney General's office can try to cease and desist and come up with other.
Yeah, actually, I have a couple of broad things I wanted to talk about, and then we have what we call some cleanup that we would like to offer to the committee, and written testimony, because the way certain language and, I'm sorry, I don't know your name, Mr.
Representative Herbold,
Nice to, you had a
the
question.
famous towns of Bristol, Lincoln, both in starts.
Oh, great. The civil penalty, we are going to recommend, actually, we don't have an ability to issue a civil penalty. What we do in the department is administrative penalties. And so our recommendation is we change the language so that it's not civil penalty, it's administrative penalty, and it's adjudicated by the board. And that's a construct that we work with regularly with all of our licensees. So but that'll be part of the written testimony that we submit to, as we call it, the cleanup.
Look forward to seeing those, the cleanup stuff. I just say as a general matter, in my experience, it's really helpful when you have a regulatory body like to have a lot of the different functions under one roof, as opposed, I mean, I'm sure you get on very well with the Department of Taxes and the AG's office and all that sort of stuff. But in my experience, it's really helpful to have, some of the standards, the investigation, and some of the enforcement pieces under one roof. It really helps in terms of effectiveness, in
Absolutely.
terms of the making sure the law is compliant. But I look forward to it.
Yeah,
That's general.
very much so. Clarity is kindness, right? Clarity makes sense. And I think that that's what this bill does as well, right? It not only takes the wholesale licensing apparatus and moves it to DLL, but it gives some authority over the seizures. And that's not something we've had. So if we go into a retail store and we see illegal products, then we can seize that. The other piece is obviously the deceptive products. I think we can all agree that that doesn't make sense and that should be not allowed. That's kind of what I had to say. Brief, but as I said, we'll follow up with some details on what we suggest cleaning up the language to make sense for our operation.
So just curious.
Yeah.
Doing more work, do you need more staff?
Oh, that's the other piece here. So Chair Marcotte had asked me if I could identify the work that the department is already doing on online compliance checks. We do that regularly in the scope of the work that the Office of Compliance and Enforcement does. We have 14 sworn law enforcement officers, and they do the compliance and enforcement for tobacco, gaming, and alcohol. So 2025, we conducted 119 online compliance checks, resulting in 29 violations that were sent to the Attorney General's office. So that was a 25% compliance failure rate. This year, we have done 44 online tobacco compliance checks, and we've had 4 violations that we've referred to the Attorney General's office. So we do this work right now within the scope of power structure. We do not support an additional position. It's not in the governor's budget, the budget that he proposed. It's not in our budget. And so we don't need the additional resources for that. We're also not organized in silos the way the bill was written in the Senate. And one of the reasons why it was taken out was it was very specific to online tobacco compliance, and we're not organized that way.
My question was more around providing the licenses that the tax department is providing now. Do you need, can the staff that you have issue those licenses?
Yeah, we have an online licensing portal, And so we would work with that's one of the reasons why we've asked for an effective date of that transfer to be next year, because we just need to work with our online licensing portal technicians to create that license.
So, okay, so you have
Yeah.
appropriate software that can be modified in order to do it, and
Yes.
great,
Yes, we do.
thank you.
Thanks so much. I'm wondering if you can contextualize those two violations figures you gave us. One was around 25% and then the next was around percent.
Yeah.
Yeah, my question is simply, what is is there a rough figure for where compliance generally ought to be? I'll be 100%, but where is a reasonable?
Yeah, great question. So both in alcohol and retail tobacco, we're at 90% or more.
I just had two other questions. When you're talking currently around seizure of contraband cigarettes, right? I assume that you seize cigarettes now. Does that happen often? Is that not something, we're adding new things to that.
So now you're asking me questions I don't have the answer to.
We're gonna get the answer.
We're gonna get you the
Okay.
answer.
Great.
Sorry.
And then the other question is when whoever goes into the stores, the enforcement officers,
Yes, the investigator.
investigators, who is penalized? Because person can be business, person can be the individual who's doing the selling. And so how does that work?
So.
It's more of a curiosity.
Yeah,
It's not our
so
section
when
of
we
the
do
bill,
a
but-
routine compliance check and we use our minor compliance program, right? And so we attempt to have the minor attempts to buy cigarettes or alcohol, and there can be a violation on the clerk and the licensee. And sometimes it's the policy of the corporation. If we give them a fine, then they sometimes can pass it down to the clerk. And that's a company policy. Did I get that right? Sort of? That's.
We rarely,
Can you state your name?
sorry, we rarely find, we seize cigarettes, if I'm there untaxed, that happens fairly rarely.
And the question of, in the study of whether or not we need to expand that to look at how you can determine vapes and pipe tobacco and the other pieces that weren't mentioned in here.
Yeah, I
That'd
think
be
that,
included,
I
or
haven't
do you
been
think
part
it
of
is?
those discussions of the study, but I think that that's partly why there is a study, right? To look at how.
Yeah, that's pretty specific to just the items that are listed in there. I'm wondering if we need to expand it to vapes and pipe tobacco, snuff and chew.
I don't have the answer to that question. I don't know if it's a question for us, is it a question for DLL, or is it a question for the Attorney General's office? Or for the tax department?
I'm happy to address it when
it's your
turn.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions I can answer?
So while we have the commissioner sitting at the table with us, I'm going to take advantage of that, and we're going to have a little discussion on H 837, which is the penny bill,
Yes,
founding bill.
a rounding bill.
I know that we heard testimony last Friday from a store in Lindenville that's also an 802
Yes,
spirits
yes.
operator, and he was talking about two different
Mhm.
point of sale systems. And so he knows that his system can go live anytime, and he wasn't sure about yours, and so we wanted to hear from you
Yes.
what your recommendations are in support of the bill.
Yeah, appreciate the opportunity. So as you mentioned, we have 802 spirits stores. We do a significant amount of cash transactions. Last year was $20 million. So we've had several people in our team review the bill. We're definitely supportive of the bill. We happen to be one of the few or only departments or agencies that are doing that much cash transactions. It would definitely help us provide guidance to the 802 Spirit stores who've been asking for the guidance. So we are in support of the bill, and we would recommend that you make it effective upon passage and not wait till July 1st, because the stores are very interested. We did some testing already with our vendor for the the point of sale devices, and we're ready to deploy whenever we either have guidance or a bill that's passed.
Okay, good. Back to.
Sorry, back to tobacco. When we explored this a couple of years ago, when we were talking about vapes and regarding a different bill, I talked to the high school principals who said that it is incredibly easy to buy these products online, and that they are regularly checking websites and hearing from students. And so I'm wondering if there's a way for you to have a tip line or some other way for these people who are already in the field and engaged with the minors who are purchasing, to share that information so that more of these online sites can be taken down faster.
We actually have that. It's on our website, and so anyone can email for a confidential complaint, and then we follow up with it.
So then we just need to coordinate with the EPA or one of the other associations so that they are more aware.
They know where to direct people to issue a complaint.
Great.
Is that something that your department can take on, is to contact the principals association so that schools are aware of?
Of the tip line?
Yeah.
Yeah, we could do that as part of our stakeholders outreach.
I think that would be really helpful.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
That's okay, that's, what were the numbers again?
Compliance?
Well, of how many, last year, how many compliance checks?
2025, we did 119 online tobacco compliance checks with a failure rate of about 25%, because we had referred 29 of violations to the Attorney General's office. 2026, we had 44 online compliance checks, and we referred 4, 10%.
So that's just from January to present, right?
Exactly.
Wondering if. I think we should keep looking at that data going forward. If we start seeing compliance rates going up or going down, so that we're not getting the message across that you can't sell in Vermont on the internet. And we may want to think about
Right.
boosting that.
So the compliance failure rate, that's a compliance failure rate,
Right.
not the compliance rate. So if we see a compliance failure rate
Going
go down, then that would be
That's-
good.
That's good,
Yes,
but
that's good.
if we see it level or going up,
Correct,
then we need to do more.
correct. Yes. So we're a quarter,
Yeah.
1.25, yeah, okay.
Anything else?
Great, thank you.
When you hear from,
I hear.
you hear from that. You don't have the schedule.
Switch it.
Yeah, I'm gonna,
I'm
yeah.
just,
Do we have anyone from tax that can answer some of the questions that Wendy couldn't answer? Or can you get us?
Regarding the study specifically, I might be able to get my deputy commissioner. Possibly, I can try.
Let's hear from Ted first.
Or Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to arrange something.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
could she is in Ways and Means right now in education.
We can just get us the information of,
Sure,
do we need to add those into the study?
sure.
Morning, Ted.
Morning, everyone.
Thanks for joining us.
Happy to be here, Tim Barnett, Joint Fiscal Office. I believe this is the first time I've been here this session.
Yeah,
Good to see you all.
you do.
So I am sending a request to share my screen, but I was planning on running through the fiscal note, talking at a very high level about the various fiscal impacts of the bill.
We'll give you a practice when you go up to Ways and Means.
That's right.
Just so the committee's aware and everybody else is that this bill is gonna go from here either to Human Services or Government Operations. But both of them need to look at this bill and then it will go to Ways and Means as stops.
Great. So broadly speaking, there are fiscal impacts from fee changes. Then there's also fines and penalties. I can talk about the routing of fines and penalties, but since JFO doesn't forecast any impact from fines and penalties, it'd be really complicated. And we like to carry the assumption that people are following the rules, although hearing from the commissioner about those failure rates, we know that's not true. But yes, so I will start with fee changes in the bill.
Before you start.
Yes.
I think I neglected to disclose that I am a retailer. I have a tobacco and liquor license and I sell second-class license, so just so everybody knows up front.
I think Jen Carvey, when she was walking through the bill, talked a bit about the current system and how if you are a retailer and you're selling both tobacco and liquor products, you receive both licenses, but you only pay for liquor licenses. This bill would decouple. Everyone's calling it decoupling, so I'll follow in that tradition. And so with that decoupled regime where retailers are getting both a tobacco and liquor license, and with the increases in fees, retailers, the tobacco license would increase from $110 to $150. And the substitute endorsement would increase from 50 to 75. Those rates are roughly approximate to inflation that has occurred since the last time these fees were changed, 2016. So with those adjustments, the amount of fee revenue that come from tobacco licenses would increase from 5,500. This is reflective of the current law where only about 50 licensees are paying independently for their tobacco license. That would increase to a little bit under $120,000 in the new structure. And then for the substitute endorsements, fee revenue would increase from $26,000 to $39,000. So in total, you would see about $125,000 of additional revenue. Fee and license revenue would flow to the Liquor Control Enterprise Fund, which supports operations at the Department of Liquor and Lottery. There is any amount that's above what the department needs for operations gets transferred to the general fund in the budget. So although these are routed to the Liquor Control Fund, if there aren't any substantial changes in operating costs, right, you can think of this as being an increase in general fund.
Do they currently spend the amount of money that they take in, or is there currently money from that fund that goes to the general?
I am going to use a number off the top of my head, but in the House recommended, so H 951, which is the budget for fiscal year 27, that direct app was about $20 million. So yes, they are generating more revenue, and this is from sales of liquor, this is licensing revenue, it's a whole ton of things, but they are generating more revenue than operation. Yeah, and that transfer changes year over year, and it depends right there. Want to make sure they have some question in the enterprise fund. So yeah. But I will confirm if I'm wildly different or off on my figure of $20 million. So the second piece that's for licenses at retailers, the wholesale dealer license, this bill the license is currently free with the Department of Taxes. This would make the fee $1,245, which is in line with the wholesale license for liquor. And so based on the current number of wholesale dealers in Vermont, it would raise about $50,000 in annual revenue. That number comes from the Department of Taxes, wholesale dealers can make their information public, and about 35 wholesale dealers have done that using the really sophisticated JFO method of rounding up to 40, assuming that there are some folks that haven't made their information public. That's where you get to about $50,000 in annual revenue, and that would start, right, it's not starting fiscal year 27, it would start in fiscal year 28 with the 1-year delay. Finally, there are the various changes to fees and penalties, fines and penalties for violations of tobacco law. Those are routed slightly different depending on whether they are civil penalties that are handled by the Judicial Bureau of the Vermont Judiciary. Those fines and penalties minus a $12.50 court technology fee go to the general fund. And then administrative penalties go to the board, the Liquor Control Enterprise Fund, and then presumably route their way to the general fund. So there's a bit of a distinction without a huge amount of difference in terms of the final end results for fines and penalties. We don't forecast fines and penalties. I will tell you, based on data I've seen that's a little old at this point, there's not a huge amount of revenue generated in, five figures in terms of fines and penalties associated with tobacco through a vision card. So even if there were substantial change, it just wouldn't net up to a huge revenue impact one way or another.
On the wholesale license, I don't. This may be a question for Jen, but I either I'm misremembering, the term of the license, it seemed like it was a one-time fee, but it's an annual fee for that wholesale license.
Jennifer, Legislative Council, the fee, the license, wholesale license does not expire, so I believe it is a
Well,
one-time.
then I will fix my different. That's good.
Yes, we do
Yeah.
not.
Yep.
Is that the intention that it is a one-time, or is it the intention that it should be an annual fee? Like, are normally these licenses annual? And is,
The existing.
so this
wholesale
should be an
license-
annual.
the Existing wholesale license in
Oh, I
tax
see.
department
Yep.
is a one-time. But I think if we're gonna be consistent with the liquor wholesale license.
Should be, yeah, should be. So the fiscal notes for that, we need to fix the, thank you.
Yes,
Good
fiscal note,
catch.
if we're here heading.
And that is just, yes, my brain thinks in annual licensing.
Yeah.
Yes, and I think it, right, given that it's currently free at the Department of Taxes. Right, it would make sense that, yeah, it was currently structured in that way. Yep. Great. Great question. And that's it in terms of the fiscal note. There is a little extra additional color commentary on the background of the current structure of how tobacco and liquor licensing works for retailers and some information about the report, but that's largely reflective of the language.
More questions for Ted? Great, thanks, Ted. So before we hear from retailers and everybody else, I think it'd be good to hear from the AG's office first. And we'll get back to our order.
Good morning. Thanks for having me. So my name is Rose Kennedy. I'm an Assistant Attorney General. I've been at the Attorney General's office since 2022 and in the Consumer Protection Division since 2024. And my primary task in that division is tobacco enforcement. So if you'll allow me, I'd like to sort of give you a little background on why we're here asking for this bill. And then I'm happy to answer questions, or you can interject as you feel free to. All right, so you might have all heard about the master settlement agreement. This is it. So this is what I use to regulate every single sale of combustible cigarettes, roll your own cigars in our state. And it's been the law since 1998, roughly. Nothing like that exists in the world of vapes. So it's kind of a Wild West type of market. And that's why we're here asking for you to step in and give us something to sort of frame this marketplace. So as you know, all year long, there's diligent enforcement taking place between our office, DLL, the Department of Tax, to monitor the tax stamps on combustible cigarettes and going into brick and mortar stores to make sure that tax stamps exist. Mr. Chair, you're 100% right. There is a loophole. When we come to taxes, I mean, when we come to nicotine products, we thoroughly understand that retailers in Vermont are trying to do the right thing. But when you're talking about vapes and nicotine pouches, the tax is collected at the wholesale level. And currently DOL doesn't have any authority to go into a brick and mortar store and verify that the vapes that they see on the shelves are actually taxed and paid. So that's one reason why we ask for the sharing of information from tax to DLL. But the other thing we're here asking you for is to bring back the tax stamp on vapes. Because when DLL goes into a brick and mortar store, they can easily verify that all the cigarettes they see on the shelves have been, first of all, like licensed by our state, and that the tax has been paid because they have a very visible tax stamp. They can't do that in the realm of vapes and nicotine pouches. Obviously, we've spoken to industry and the wholesalers, and we understand that there are some issues because unlike a packet of cigarettes or a carton of cigarettes that are pretty uniform in size, these products sort of run the gamut. But we're here to ask you to impose it anyway because we're there. And we're a little bit concerned that these products are coming in potentially online, making their way into the brick and mortar stores, and we're not getting the tax that we're owed as a state. And there's a reason why we tax them at 92%, because we've determined that they are highly addictive, not very helpful, and that they are attractive to youth. I'm going off my script a little bit here, but again, happy to answer questions. So the big thing in this bill that we really like is the deceptive devices ban. And if I can share my screen. I will just, if you'll allow me, show you some of the images of these products so you have them in mind. I don't know, is there a better way to make it bigger?
That's good.
You got it, okay. So there are a lot of products out there that, you know, we don't think is even arguable. These are meant to attract kids. Some of them look like toys. Some of them look like cameras. Some of them are developed to be very stealthy looking so that adults, teachers, parents wouldn't even know that their kid is vaping. This is a hoodie and a sweatshirt, and the person just sucks on a little drawstring. There are gaming devices that encourage youth to puff more to get a higher score. And so, of course, when they're puffing more, they're getting more addictive.
Are those sold here?
So we're not seeing a ton of them in Vermont yet, but they're coming. And the other thing that I think we got to keep in mind, we have a pretty active school program where, you know, kids can voluntarily give up their vapes, or if they're confiscated, they sort of make their way to a lot of us in this room so that we know what's out there. I think what you got to understand is these may be more attractive to kids, so they're better protected in their custody, and that's why we might not be seeing them yet. But we know they exist and they're popular and they're out there. And so before they become wide rampant in Vermont, we're asking you guys to ban them. Some more games. Some of them have smartphone capabilities, so they are actually collecting data from our kids, which is a whole other issue. Or,
I
oh,
thought it would be helpful.
okay. So some of these might be in there, just so you know. And as you pass them around, just take a whiff of what they smell like. It's
No.
very fruity. Some look like inhalers, so like a teacher might be afraid to take it off of a kid, thinking that they need it. And then you've heard about school supplies. Again, meant to sort of be stealthy and to be able to be used by the youth without an adult actually even being aware they exist. So we feel like that's kind of an easy consumer protection push in this bill to get rid of those right off the bat. You know, probably a lot of adults don't need to use something that looks so hidden in plain sight. So I don't need to share my screen anymore, but I thought it was important to have that.
Oh, that's true.
The one thing we would ask, Mr. Chair, is to, you asked about who wants to go after those products. We do. And we would ask for their language about giving us the authority that if we find out who's selling those or, you know, distributing them to anyone in our state, if you ban them, then we want the ability to go after them both under the Consumer Protection Act and similar to the delivery sales ban, which is its own penalty. So we failed to put that in the original version. We would ask to make some language with legislative council to correct that. And so that we can go after these folks with a potential penalty of like $15,000 if we find these programs. That's the same as an online sale, just so you know.
Video. I'll go with that. Okay, so work with. Come up with the language.
As you've heard, S 198 increases the penalties for those who would sell without a license or to underage folks. We hope you support that. Again, we thought that there was a bit of a loophole because DOL has a system in place and going into brick and mortar stores and checking out the stamp for cigarettes. Nothing like that exists for for vapes and nicotine pouches. So we'd ask you to.
What about the other, I mean, there's snuff. There's the pouches, but then there's snuff.
Yeah, so anything with tobacco is currently under the MSA and they have authority. So roll your own, the little
Okay.
tobacco pouches. I think that's what's
Snuff,
it is.
okay.
Yeah, and so that's all sort of taken care of. Now,
But
they have authority, just so you know, Department of Tax has authority to put taxes on all that. They haven't. I don't think the volume is huge in Vermont, so they, I think, monitor that in a different way. Some states do. So even those products that are not uniform, some states have stamps on. One of the complaints we heard is that no states have put a stamp on vapes or nicotine pouches yet. And so what? Like Vermont's can be a leader in this field and they have to figure it out eventually because these products aren't going away. They're taking over the market. If you've read some of the latest studies, the vaping increasing is getting higher than traditional tobacco. So I think trying to figure out how to rein this market in and make sure that the tax is paid and would be very good.
but I don't sell vapes, so I'm not really up to speed on, but there's a delivery system. And then there's capsules that go into the delivery system.
There's both. There's, and I think probably some other folks can speak more to this, but there are systems where you put a separate liquid capsule in, and then there are the vapes that have the liquid in it and are disposable. So, and the increase is in the disposable ones, and they're fairly cheap. They're like $15 to $20. So again, attractive to youth. You can get a lot of hits out of it. That was the other thing that we put in this bill. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So $15 to $20, and how many, what does that equate to for a carton of cigarettes?
Are you better able to answer that?
The nicotine level, sorry.
Just like
number.
just like how many cigarettes does it replace?
It's a completely different experience.
Yeah.
The cigarette is used really at a time. Smoke a whole cigarette generally. When people are vaping, they're generally grazing on that vape all the time. So it's not, you can't really equate it. And so they could be consuming much more nicotine in a vape in a day than they would be able to physically smoke in a cigarette.
Right, I guess what
Okay, so let's hold those questions
So they're-
for when they're.
It's very
invited to-
complicated because vapes kind of run the gamut between being like 5 milligrams of nicotine. What that means per puff, I'm not sure. And we also are starting to see some vapes where you can up the nicotine concentration so that like you can like self, increase it to, I don't know, 25 milligrams in a single puff. Like, and I think I forgot to sort of mention this in my background, like these products are supposed to be regulated by the feds, by the FDA. And what happened basically when they came onto the market, they overwhelmed the FDA. There were, I have the amount of the applications that were in here. 6.5 million applications are at the FDA for these products. And so currently there's only been 41 e-cigarettes and 26 nicotine pouches, I believe, that have actually gone through the process and are authorized by the FDA. Everything else you see on the shelves is illegal. And the feds took a stance because they were overwhelmed that they would use their prosecutorial discretion to leave the things that were already on the market and not really go after them, lack of resources. And so that's why we have this market with a ton of illegal programs. I work constantly with our fellow states to try to figure out how to combat this and come up with state solutions because we're not the feds. And so taxing is a good way to sort of come at it. Banning things that should be clearly, deemed unsafe for our youth. But I go back to like, it's just, we don't really know how these products work because not many of them have actually gone through the very stringent scientific testing that the FDA does. So it's hard to figure out exactly like what amount of nicotine you get for each compound. That makes sense.
And just for clarity, the reason why I was asking is because $15 and I don't know what the current cost of a carton is. I think it's somewhere around 40 to 50 bucks.
Yeah.
Which
Carton of cigarettes.
I don't know how much they cost.
Obviously.
I was thinking it was when they were like 15, 20 bucks.
So a pack of
So-
cigarettes right now range from anywhere from $7-ish up to $13 to $15 a pack. So you're talking about up to $150 a carton.
And how much is that, like taxes? That
Almost half.
almost half. I'm
You said
seeing a
92%.
great revenue stream on a horrible product. That we're missing out on causing a,
Yeah,
You know,
that's why we're here, because
Yeah.
like, when you go into a store, you'll see tax stamps, so you know at least the tax has been paid,
right,
whether you believe in the product or not. You don't see it on vape,
right.
and yet you don't know what's in these. They're technically illegal. All right, what else can I answer for you? I think I wrote down some of your questions.
So on the vapes and the delivery system, so now a lot of them are throwaway.
Yeah,
Are they recyclable?
so that's, Jen mentioned that they need to be disposed as a hazardous waste. So it's very complicated. I've talked to ANR about this too. There's a lot of them have a lithium battery that heats the nicotine fluid, so that's partly why it's a hazardous waste. And then the nicotine itself is a hazardous waste. So states are still sort of struggling to figure out exactly the best way to dispose of them, but I think ANR has sort of developed the framework, and that's why we said that it has to be at cost of the person who sold it or produced it and in compliance with their guidance. So yeah, not easy.
So are we looking, I don't. So we have other products, hazardous products that we've created, that the manufacturers have to provide places for them to be picked up and disposed of properly.
And
Do we have anything like that on? Jen? I don't-
based on my conversations with ANR, I think these products would fall under that category, whether or not that's sort of well known and how that's sort of been, conveyed to the manufacturers, I don't know, or how users would know to get it back to it. So I think that's all fairly new, but I can certainly look into that more.
Might be something that human services may want to add to places, products that we have a place to dispose of them, whether it's at a recycling center or different businesses. I know there's businesses around the state that take back paint, take
Yeah.
back fluorescent bulbs, and maybe they need to do something about that. Maybe.
Just there, and then I have two other questions. If we require each product sold in the state to have where you recycle it on it, we will know who's following the law and who isn't. So that might be a short-term solve or
Yeah.
get to the study.
No, that's a great idea.
Question about the study, amount of nicotine in it. How, I mean, we don't tax cigarettes. Some are higher nicotine than others. These are unregulated products, so they can tell us whatever they want on how much nicotine is in them or not. Why is that the thing that we're looking at the most in the study to figure out how to tax them?
So I think currently the study has both the idea of whether or not a tax stamp should be applied to vapes, and we would ask you to take that out of the study and put it back in the bill with, perhaps a delayed implementation date so that industry and agencies can work it out. I think it is somewhat complicated because when you're talking about levels of nicotine concentration, we're going to see more and more higher increase, plus these ones that kind of can scale up and down. And so trying to figure out the best way to do that, because like you say, it's different in the cigarette where it's just the cigarette that you tax. So trying to figure out how you tax different concentrations of nicotine is worthy of a study. But I mean, our concern was, if you look at the ones that have been authorized by the FDA, they're around 5 to 6, anywhere from 1 to 5 to 6 milligrams of nicotine. I don't think it's going to stay there. And so we really wanted to have something in place to de-incentivize that spike. Because obviously the more nicotine and concentration in these products, the more dangerous they'll be. And I'm sure others will speak to that as well. So we didn't have a great, I think it is complicated, and trying to figure out how you make differentiated tax stamps for those different concentrations may require a study. I mean, maybe there's a way to just, again, make it the delayed implementation as well. I leave that to you to think about, but that's kind of where we were.
Yeah,
Maybe recommendation gets the reason me.
Yeah, I'm not convinced that that should be the focus of the study, so I'd love to, and putting it out there, I'd love to hear more from folks on why the concentrate could incentivize misrepresenting how much nicotine is in there and setting up,
Absolutely.
These code words for folks to be, it just could be a weird, not that anybody is gonna change what they do for the small state of Vermont, and if other people follow, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay, and then my last question is, and this is just I just want to understand this better. Can you explain how administrative penalties versus civil penalties versus misdemeanors, and if you're not the right person, I'm totally fine with that, all
Yeah,
fit
I'm not
into
sure.
this? I can get the information elsewhere if you're not the right person.
Yeah, I was surprised to hear that DOL uses administrative penalties and not civil. But so they might be in a better position to sort of answer that question.
Okay,
I mean, the difference between criminal and civil obviously is that there's no potential jail time or.
so then
criminal record.
so having only administrative penalties, does that stop the AG from being able to go after repeat offenders in these
So that's mostly handled by DLL right now anyway.
Okay.
We're talking about like the deceptive devices and online sales. We go after that and receive injunctive relief like cease and desist and civil penalties.
And then the very last question, and then I'll let somebody else talk. We're gonna get rid of being able to sell these deceptive products. What happens if somebody already owns them? And is there a way to disincentivize that also?
And I don't have the exact language.
Or can you bring them into the state? Right.
Yeah, you're right. We didn't put in language that said possess.
Yes.
and, you know, the thing is that a lot of them are disposable, so they don't have a long life. But, so if we pass the bill, we would probably be handling a majority of the problem by making sure no more are sold. But I think that's a fair point that we could have put in some language about possessing. To sort of.
You're not opposed to that?
No, not at all, and to discourage.
Can give them away.
Sure.
Yeah, so I wanted to follow up on at least one of Representative Graham's questions around, you know, sort of the whole enforcement or investigation process. And can you talk a little bit more about, you know, how that works before it gets to you? Because you deal with the judicial bureau. No?
No, we go after them civilly
Okay,
in
so,
Superior Court.
oh, okay. Yeah, so help me understand a little bit more about how that works in terms of you get something from DLL, I'm sure, or not, and trying to understand the relationship, in getting back to my
Yeah,
kind of
no,
thing
it's
about
not, it's
having some sort of unifying scheme that can really help with enforcement in my experience. So I just wondering how that works.
Okay, so let me sort of break it down into a couple different categories. One is like under the MSA, we're tasked with making sure
Right.
that, you know, no illegal cigarettes are being sold in our state, that proper taxes are being paid. So DLL will go in, they have their investigators and they will go into the brick and mortar stores and they will verify that tax stamps are on every single carton or pack of cigarette. And that, we have on our website what cigarettes are legal in our state. They will verify that what they're seeing in the store has passed our fire safety test and, you know, are properly registered with our office. If they were to find something that wasn't in compliance, I think that they have some of their own authority where they can choose how to take those cigarettes off the shelves. Sometimes we hear about it, sometimes we don't. Sometimes they use state's attorney's offices to sort of deal with these issues. But generally, we're in contact about like how their audit has gone, what they found, if they're seeing any cigarettes that shouldn't be on shelves or in our state. I mean, I've been involved with one situation where like, you know, someone came from Canada in a van with a lot of cigarettes that obviously weren't tax stamped. That is also a criminal charge and they went to the local SA to sort of pursue that case. So sometimes we work with them, sometimes they work with other agencies to sort of enforce the law. On online sales, so, you know, in Vermont, we have a great law where you are not allowed to sell these products directly to consumers. DLL has been, since I've been here, and I think before me, they have randomly picked websites and just, you know, try to figure out if they're going to sell them a product. They try to figure out if they ask, you know, if they're underage and if they do anything about it. And if the company, the website actually ships them a product that contains nicotine or tobacco or is, you know, otherwise prohibited under our statute, then they let me know. They send me their case. And then I start a civil investigation trying to figure out, okay, we're aware of one sale to our state. How many more have you done and why? And aren't you aware of our law? And then that's a process where I collect their data and their records. And then I start to negotiate about like, you know, I don't just want you to stop, or maybe I do, like I just want you to stop and shut down your website so that if anyone from Vermont tries to get this product, it won't allow it, or I might seek civil penalties. And if we can't reach an agreement, then I could sue in civil court and go after them civilly under the Consumer Protection Act and our Delivery Salesman Act.
Right, so what I was catching there, and I'm not familiar with the master settlement, there's actually a registration process that they need to register with you. I was also, how does that relate to the licensing process that DLL?
It's a little bit different.
Yeah.
So that's to sell or distribute, and then I deal with like what actual cigarette can be sold.
Oh, okay. And so the Judicial Bureau that's a tax issue, I guess. The Judicial Bureau is used to enforce tax laws, is that it?
Tickets, I think.
Well,
So,
it's like a ticket.
yeah, I don't know for sure
Okay,
what their
but you don't deal
jurisdiction
with it.
is, yeah.
Who deals with it in
I
terms
think
of?
DLL can deal with that directly. like the going into the store and making sure they haven't sold directly to
Sure,
the child.
but who prosecutes the case in the judicial bureau or whatever?
I think it just goes from the investigator and they hand out the ticket.
Depends on
Oh,
what
I see.
specific activity.
Like, let's say an underage sale at a store.
That specifically, sorry, you know, Sean, yellow, that specifically is issued. The same way the traffic ticket is issued to the clerk that makes the sale to a minor. That would be.
One last question. So when it gets to say a civil penalty or something like that, I'm trying to understand the relationship between the department and the Attorney General's office around, you know, some of the core issues around, you know, how do you, what case you can bring forward, when you settle, you know, whatever. What's that relationship between the department and you folks in terms of how you prosecute that civil?
So I think the most concrete example is online sales, where they're doing the investigation by trying to buy the product online. And if it gets shipped to them, they present the case to me. And then, like I said, I start a civil investigation
Sure.
and then go from there.
Right. And do you have any contact with DLL after it's referred to you?
Yeah, I talk to DL investigators all the time.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'll let them know, like, you know, yeah, I sort of keep them abreast of what's going on with my investigation.
Okay, thanks.
I think we sort of covered everything unless anyone has another question.
So something caught my eye when we were going through this with Jen, but I think we're plugging a loophole too, or closing a loophole in internet sales, when it talks about they can only be shipped to a licensed wholesaler or a retail dealer, and that, I think that loophole was able to allow possibly unscrupulous retailers from purchasing off the internet without paying the tax.
Yeah, so here's how I think this could work. You know, you buy a chunk of vapes from a licensed wholesaler and you pay the tax. And you have that paperwork. And then you buy a ton off the internet where you're not paying the tax and you put those on your shelves too. And then if tax ever asked you, you'd be able to show them from the original shipment. Like, that was our concern. But if you provide a stamp for every single product that is on the shelf, then you can't do that. And you're making sure that tax has actually been collected. And we're not saying that that's widespread, but like, why take the risk? Is what we thought. And I would just also add that there are some MSA products that don't actually conform to the shape and size of cartons and packs. And they're going to have to figure this out because they're MSA products. And they are working on it. Industry and other states that have bigger markets are going to do it. So it's here. And so, you know, luckily that for their sake, they just haven't been told to do it yet. But like, once you tell them to do it, they'll figure it out.
Right. The other piece to that, closing that loophole, is wholesaler license at DLF. So there's two pieces now that
Right.
have to purchase from a wholesaler or licensed wholesaler, which it says here, but you know, that's through
They would never
tax
know.
and
Yeah.
don't really know.
Yeah, and tax does, you know, we've talked to tax a lot. They want to be clear that they're not an enforcement agency. They are a tax collecting agency. So it's not like DLL that actually goes into a store and verifies that everything's proper.
Yeah.
Anything else?
So, yeah, we just worked with Jen on the language.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Good to go.
All right,
Okay.
thank you.
And we'll talk with Ways and Means. Just suggest that they might want to go forward with a tax stamp now, not study it.
That'd be great. Thank you. Thanks.
It's a line to get in.
Maggie, and then we'll take a break.
You leave one.
Oh, no.
Hi, I'm Maggie Lenz. I'm here on behalf of the Vermont Retail Grocers Association, and that's 198. My testimony, there's some things that I just heard from the AG's office that we're just not really prepared to comment on, but outside of the scope of what I came in prepared to talk about. I think I heard $15,000 raised as perhaps a penalty on the defective devices, if I heard that correctly. So I would just have questions. That seems very high. But what I will say confidently for our membership is, and it's a little nuanced, so I can't sit here and feel good about saying, yes, we want to see any increases in fees for retailers. That's tough to do. They're operating on thin margins. But we do feel that that folks came into the room in the Senate in good faith and that we have reached a compromise that we can accept in terms of the fees. In terms of the penalty for selling to a minor, I think we feel really confident that our membership is very compliant, really prioritizes compliance, and that I think bears out in the numbers. 90% compliance checked. So I think we feel all right about those provisions. In terms of the tax piece, I think it's probably important to hear from the wholesaler. If we have someone on the agenda to talk about that, we were supportive of keeping that piece in the study. And that's really my testimony.
Questions for Maggie?
Anticipate a little more.
Yeah.
Well, I will tell you though that I have heard from distributors that they're worried that there are products that are being sold in by retailers that are purchased outside of distribution. So, and then these retailers, when they don't sell it, trying to turn them back into our distributors where they never bought them from anyway.
That is news to me, I agree with you, but I'm not aware of that.
But there have been, and I know these distributors have had conversations with DLL as well.
So you don't have issues with the increase in fees or penalties. This is something that,
We can live with this version of the bill.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the study, the tax stamp, that was also a compromise.
We didn't really weigh in on the tax piece and felt like that was a little bit more for wholesale to discuss, but we do have some concerns about changing a tax structure, what it might do to drive, unintended consequences, driving sales to the illicit market if things are being restructured. But I would say, yeah, we're comfortable with keeping that in the study and learn more about how this operates and how this will really impact folks on the ground. It will give us time to understand it better as well.
So yeah, compliance enforcement is going to be really important as we change the structure.
Yeah, and I think we join others who are working on this bill in supporting the deceptive prices piece. Again, I concerns about what was just raised in terms of a penalty if someone is selling it. But in terms of the concept, our members are not looking to sell products that are going to be dangerous and deceptive.
Michael?
So how would that affect if, let's say we did charge considerable amount more on these products? Because it would have an impact on purchases in the state of Vermont, because they could just go across the border and get them for, if we applied the same fee that we do for cigarettes. Your thoughts?
We raised that briefly in the Senate, and I think that is a concern, and that's what I was getting at, driving things toward the illicit market and also cross-border market. I think that's a question. So that is a concern in terms of the shifting tax structure.
There's not a,
There isn't a tax raise.
right. there's
No,
not-
no, I know. I'm just thinking, I guess a stamp tax, though.
It's the same
It's the
tax,
same
it's just
tax,
making
it's
sure
just-
it's actually
okay.
You're
paid.
putting a
Yeah.
stamp, like
Okay.
cigarettes now, if you flip the bottoms, there's a stamp on there. So we know that it's a Vermont tax stamp. So when the cigarettes, when the distributors here receive it from the wholesaler, there's no stamp on it. So each state will put their own stamps on, so we know where they came from and they know who's collecting the taxes on it.
That's why I think it's important that you're a wholesaler.
I think. You know, it's- Any other questions from Maggie? Okay, thanks, Mike. Oh, that's right. I guess everybody deserves a break today. So let's break to 10, come back at 10:45 and continue the discussion, go offline.